Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.
Southeast Radio.
Good morning, I'm Karl Fitzpatrick and welcome to Business Matters. Well, with the coronavirus becoming ever closer to home, Irish businesses are becoming more and more concerned about the short and medium-term implications for their businesses. With those trading internationally most at risk, my first guest is ideally placed to share his insights and advice. Simon McKeever is the CEO of the Irish Exporters Association, which is the independent representative body for all Irish exporters. So Simon, what does the coronavirus mean for your members?
There's a kind of a demand and a supply side of this. So on the demand side, companies that make things that get shipped into China, so there is a kind of clogging of ports and logistics facilities in China at the moment. So a lot of companies that make things and export them out to China are finding it very difficult to get it into China at the moment. There's also a backlog in certain ports out there of items that aren't getting through to companies in China. That's on the kind of demand side. On the supply side, so Irish companies that make things where they're buying component parts from China, there is an issue about inventory for a number of companies in relation to that. And that situation could be 4 to 6 weeks away. One or two companies are saying that because of the Lunar New Year holiday in China, they have a glut of product at the moment, but by and large, people are saying to us that they're running short of it. So that has a number of kind of implications. On the exporting side, when companies are sending items out to China, particularly in the food and drink and in the where there is refrigerated containers that are needed, there's particular issues going on in relation to that. So if the ship arrives in the port or it's heading to a port and the port is full and has got no space for that container to be unloaded, the freight companies have the ability within their contractual terms to go to an alternative destination. So we have companies that are telling us that items that were due to be shipped to China have been sent to Malaysia, have been sent to Singapore, and that's within their contract rules. And these logistics companies have their own difficulties in relation to the coronavirus. One issue is the kind of dislocation of items, and it is very difficult. And you and I were talking about this earlier on. If a product is designed to be sold into a particular market, it doesn't necessarily transfer as a sale into another market because of different kind of rules and regulations that exist in that market. So that's one issue in relation to it. Where items have been dropped in the port in different parts of China, and because of the coronavirus, then the port is relatively closed and the items are very slow to get out, those containers remain in the port. And if it's a refrigerated container, it is plugged in, and so there is increasing charges that companies are facing in relation to leaving those items in the port. So that's another issue. We're now beginning to pick up as well a delay, and it's just a creeping in at the moment, but a delay in payments coming out of China. And you can imagine if restaurants and businesses are closed, then they are not buying items that Irish companies and other countries' companies might be selling into that. So they're not getting paid, and then the supplier is not getting paid, and then it backs up. Now, we're probably a number of weeks or a month or two away from kind of seeing the impact of that, but it could be a very nasty sting in the tail of this coming up.
One of the other challenges, of course, facing us as a result of all of this is that we don't have any government in place.
Well, I think that's one of the key issues that we have on this at the moment. And, I'm delighted to be on the station with you today to say that we need leadership on this at the moment, because I'm not seeing it in any way, shape or form at the moment. When I look at the approach that was taken by the previous government with regard to Brexit and managing that situation, there was an unbelievably good job done in that. And I think we are going to very quickly need an approach like that to this problem. I view this as a clear and present danger to the economy at both a micro and macro level, and it requires a minister of the interim government that we have to stand up and take ownership of this and take leadership on it, because there's different sorts of information coming out in relation to this, and I think it needs to be coordinated in a lot better way than it is at the moment. So somebody within this government needs to put their hand up and take responsibility for this and give leadership to the country on this. It is not happening.
You mentioned cash flow difficulties, and of course that's going to be a byproduct of what's happening here in this respect. So if we have leadership, as you're looking for, what would you be looking for them to do to be able to address that cash flow issue for local and national businesses?
Well, I think that in order to keep the wheels of commerce going, over a period of time, that companies will be facing cash flow issues because they won't be able to sell items. Whether they're either importing them or exporting, they won't be able to sell them, and there will be a delay in payments. And if factories are full, what happens to those factories? So I think there's a number of things we will be looking, and I've already called on the government to look at short-term cash flow lending, and there is precedent in the guarantee scheme that was put in place during the recession.
That's the European Globalisation
No, that was
Fund?
our own one. But then there is the European Globalisation Fund, which has been called on before, and I believe there's about 1.6 billion euros available in that. And that is something that the government should look at applying for help for Irish businesses that have been hit with an issue that we're facing with at the moment. So I think that those are two of the mechanisms that are going to come from that will potentially help businesses.
And from a trading perspective, what advice is the Irish Exporters Association giving to its members today?
It's very difficult to say what exactly you can do in this. I mean, the word that comes to my mind is alternatives. So can you find alternative routes to market? There is a bit of air still open to get into China. I'm sorry, we're talking about China. We need to talk about Italy as well, by the way.
Of course.
But so there is some air open getting into China, but substituting air for sea, what you would normally use, is a very expensive alternative. So can you find an alternative market for the goods that you're generating? And that takes time. We talked about the product has been designed for a particular market. There is particular regulations, packaging, language issues that might be in place to move it to a different market. From a sourcing point of view, can you find the materials that you need closer to home? Can you find them within the European Union somewhere? That will make life an awful lot easier. But again, there are issues. It's not a light bulb moment. There is time required to be able to adopt and adapt the product to different sources of supply.
Two other considerations here, of course, are the shipping contracts. It's so important for companies to look at the shipping contracts that they have in place.
Well, we have had a look at some of the contractors, and bearing in mind that, because I do not want to demonise the logistics companies, because they're right in the epicenter of this in any way, shape or form. So they are forced to make certain decisions on this, but they have, in inverted commas, force majeure items in their contracts. So companies need to look at the contracts that they have in place with their service providers at the moment. A number of companies are actually saying to us, look, we're actually okay because we have so much space booked for so far out long. But a lot of companies are telling us that they're seeing increased costs.
Of course, another consideration is insurance. Are they insured against the risks associated with this?
Yeah, and if it's a force majeure issue, is it covered under any insurance policy in relation to that? That is an issue, and a number of companies don't have insurance in relation to that. I think the other issue that is sitting out there is that this is a rapidly evolving issue that companies. So we started going on the airwaves about this issue about 2.5 to 3 weeks ago. And I've done a number of media interviews in relation to this, and in the last week I've done one nearly every day. And the story that I keep going on about the air is now evolving. So what we are now seeing creeping in. So yesterday when I was doing interviews, I said on Monday we got our first Italy-related query coming into the IEA. On Tuesday we had 3 coming in. Yesterday we had more. So Italy is actually a particular issue, and we should go back and talk about that in a second. What we are now getting queries out of companies is in relation to the more social side of this. So there is a level of anxiety beginning to come in to companies at an employee level. They are anxious about what is going to happen, what are their company going to do, what measures will they take to ensure safety. I've heard stories about people coming to Ireland to meet people where the meeting has been cancelled, where there has been corporate decisions for companies that they will not fly to different parts of the world. And I think we just need to be very careful, because what do companies need to do in relation to this? And we run a small business ourselves. I mean, we're 15 people. We're a services business, so it's a little different for us in that, what we will do if we end up being in lockdown is that we will work from home. So we can all bring a laptop home and we can work from home. For a company that's actually making things,
it's a different ballgame.
It's a different ballgame, and it is really up to the health authorities to come up with what is best practice in relation to that. But I think as if we get to a point where there is going to be a lockdown situation, then people just won't travel.
And Simon, how closely are you working with international bodies to be able to stay ahead so that you can keep your members informed with the latest information as to what's happening out there?
It's more that we're working with our members, and our members encompass, so we're a national organisation, we are very close to government as well, but we are, as a national organisation, we have every type of business that you can think of is a member of the organisation. So we have a good insight into the different sectors, but about 20% of our members are in the transport and logistics space as well. So we have a good sense of the kind of difficulties that they're facing in that. So I'm in daily contact with those type of companies.
Well, that was Simon McKeever, the CEO of the Irish Exporters Association, and I've no doubt that we will be speaking to Simon regularly over the coming months as businesses attempt to deal with the consequences of the coronavirus. After the break, I'll be speaking to James O'Sullivan of Wizzy Internet about how his local broadband business is competing against the national players. So do stay tuned for that.
Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.